we're back with another video, and today we're doing reactions again. You know what I'm saying? I told y'all guys we're gonna be mixing it up, making sure I'm putting out gaming content, just putting out different type of stuff for you guys to watch and entertain, and also just to more, and it's also more like a documentation for you guys of what I see in my life, or what you guys want me to get my opinion, just stuff like that, or just going out meeting new people and all that. But today we got 6 most disturbing moments caught on live TV footage. Bro, there's been so much things we seen on our phone. Bro, I remember in like 6th grade, that was like what, 2016, 2015, bro. Crazy stuff on the internet. That's when I got my phone, bro. That's when I got my first phone. I wish I never had I wish I had the mindset back then of some things, I don't need to, yeah, whatever though. But anyways, follow me on also NOlimitbrax and Brax Visionarius. Also, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, comment down below what's the most disturbing moments you ever seen on your phone on social media, guys. All right, let's get into it.
Now went live from the Miriam River in Brazil to cover a tragic incident that happened there just a day earlier. In the early hours of June 29, a group of teenagers had decided to go for a swim in the river. Unfortunately, they underestimated its depth, resulting in the disappearance of Raisa Fernandez.
Damn.
Seconds after entering the water, her friends watched her dip beneath the surface, and that was the last time anyone saw her alive. Divers looked for her underwater, riverbank, hoping she might have washed ashore somewhere. But even after hours of searching, Raisa was nowhere to be found. NOlimitbrax intended to use this broadcast as an opportunity to educate viewers.
Sorry guys, I had some technical difficulties.
On the 30th of June 2025, a reporter named NOlimitbrax went live from the Miriam River in Brazil to cover a tragic incident that happened there just a day earlier. In the early hours of June 29, a group of teenagers had decided to go for a swim in the river. Unfortunately, they underestimated its depth, resulting in the disappearance of 13-year-old Raisa Fernandez. Seconds after entering the water, her friends watched her dip beneath the surface, and that was the last time anyone saw her alive. Divers looked for her underwater, while rescuers scoured the riverbank, hoping she might have washed ashore somewhere. But even after hours of searching, Raisa was nowhere to be found. NOlimitbrax intended to use this broadcast as an opportunity to educate viewers on the dangers of river currents and general river safety, not knowing that he was about to solve the mystery of Raisa's disappearance on live TV. He took off his shoes and started slowly walking into the river while talking about the sudden increase in depth and how dangerous it can be for inexperienced swimmers.
Quanto mais você desce, mais fundo fica. Ó, aqui, ó. Até que aqui é de boa, mas só que é uma descida. Aqui onde ela se afogou, gente, é uma descida. Pra você ver aqui, ó, o tanto que eu passei aqui, daqui dá mais ou menos uns 2,5 metros. Ó, e quanto mais você anda, ó a diferença aqui já onde eu estou agora, ó.
Be careful,
então,
man.
pessoal, e ainda tem a correnteza. Aqui já, olha, ó, um passinho para frente, a água já está praticamente me cobrindo. Então, o risco aqui é muito grande.
However, nothing could have prepared him for what he was about to encounter just seconds later.
Ó a fundura aqui, ó. Ui.
Ew.
Eu acho que tem um negócio aqui no fundo da água.
Hell no, bro.
Não, era mole.
Hell no, bro. Bro, that would have made me jump out my clothes, bro.
Será que não é ela, não?
That would have made me jump out my clothes.
While trying to demonstrate the river's deceptive drop-off, NOlimitbrax accidentally stepped on something lying on the riverbed. It was too soft and organic feeling to be a rock or a submerged log, which caught him off guard. The murky water made it impossible to see beneath the surface. But NOlimitbrax was starting to realize what it could be, leaving him too disturbed to go back and investigate further. He got out of the water and contacted authorities immediately. And it wasn't long before divers recovered the remains of Raisa from that exact spot. Later autopsy report confirmed that there was no foul play involved. What happened to her was nothing more than a tragic accident.
Bro.
On September 25, 2025, the CBS 6 station in Albany, New York received a strange email with a 2-page document. It contained a nearly incomprehensible rant featuring Arnold Schwarzenegger, archaic centuries-old laws, and a proposal to create a board of trustees with prosecutorial immunity. However, the most important aspect of this document wasn't its content. Instead, the reason it stood out among the hundreds of emails the channel received every day was its author, 53-year-old Lawrence Krauss, who also included a selfie alongside the document. You see, Lawrence was currently under investigation for ending the lives of his own parents and getting away with it for over 8 years. It happened in August 2017. His 86-year-old father and 83-year-old mother were living out their retirement in their home in Crestwood Court in Albany, New York. And suddenly, they were gone without a trace. None of the neighbors saw them leaving or heard anything about where they were going. Their house was also left abandoned, with Lawrence only visiting it occasionally to collect mail, mow the lawn, and clear the snow. When asked about his parents, he claimed that they had moved back to Germany and won't be coming back. The neighbors had no reason to distrust Lawrence, so no one questioned their absence, and life went on as usual. A distant relative even requested a welfare check in 2020. But the neighbors repeated the same explanation Lawrence had given, ending the officer's questioning without any further suspicion. It wasn't until mid-2025 that the Albany police became aware of something shady going on with the Krauss family. Someone had been collecting Lawrence's parents' social security payments, even though the two hadn't been seen in years. This resulted in the police launching a formal investigation, and after months, finally executing a search warrant at the Krauss home on September 23rd. Over the next 48 hours, detectives collected thousands of financial documents and other evidence. More importantly, they discovered the remains of Lawrence's parents buried in the backyard. Lawrence likely knew that he was the prime suspect in this case, but instead of turning himself in or trying to run away, he made the unusual decision of sending this document to the local news network alongside his contact information. One of the directors at CBS 6 was familiar with the Krauss case and immediately jumped at the opportunity to interview Lawrence. After giving him a call, Lawrence claimed that he was willing to do a live interview with the channel only if they published his document on the internet for everyone to see.
That's crazy.
The network agreed, and less than an hour later, Lawrence was sitting with a CBS 6 reporter for a live interview. Lawrence was a bit hesitant at first.
Bro, do y'all ever see people who just look like they do something, bro? I ain't gonna lie, I don't care, bro. I mean, it can be anything. You know they look like they play basketball. You know they look like they play football. You know they look like they... You know they look like they cook. You know they look... Bro, you know.
After some pressure, he cracked and confessed
to everything.
You know
when somebody looks bad.
I want to hear from you.
Yeah.
What did you do to your parents?
I buried them in their property.
You buried them in the backyard of that house in Albany.
Right.
When it actually happened, when your parents died, did they know it was happening to them?
Oh, yeah.
And they knew it was at your hand?
Well, yes, no one else's.
Right. So they realized what you were doing to them.
I would square up with my... Like, I'd be defensive
They
right
knew
now.
that this was it for them, that they were perishing at your hand.
Yes. And it was so quick.
How did you do it?
Yeah, I can't talk about that.
Well, you've just told us that
Right.
it was at your
He
hand.
might as well...
Were there...
Wait, I can't talk. I just committed to committing murder. I can't talk about it, though. What? Man, open your
drugs
mouth,
involved?
man.
Was there a suffocation? Was there... You suffocated them.
How?
You suffocated your parents.
Yeah.
What made this confession so disturbing, however, was the way Lawrence tried to portray it as something righteous. His argument essentially boiled down to, my parents were suffering from old age, so I did them a favor. Even though the neighbors described the couple as elderly, they were by no means sick or bedridden. They had normal routines where they tended to their garden, shared mint leaves with neighbors' kids, and listened to Polish music every day. Their lives weren't nearly as miserable as Lawrence tried to portray during this interview. Now, it's unclear if he's severely mentally ill and genuinely believed everything he was saying, or if this interview was his way of trying to paint himself as the concerned son to earn the public's favor before his inevitable arrest. In either case, he had no way of escaping the consequences of his heartless actions. He was arrested immediately after walking out of the network's building and is currently awaiting trial for the death of his parents.
He thought he was supposed to get away? What do y'all think, bro? Do y'all think he was gonna get away if he really tried? Bro, I would have tried to sprint. No, I think he just wanted the attention. Like, he looked like he'd be doing stuff, bro.
On the night of October 28, 2023, the Utilita Arena in Sheffield, England was packed with over 8,000 spectators. They were there to watch the ice hockey match between the Nottingham Panthers and the Sheffield Steelers. The whole thing was also being broadcast live on TV for fans across the world, and the match started off completely normal. The first period ended without either team scoring a point. About 35 minutes later, the score was 4-2 in favor of the Sheffield Steelers. The Panthers needed to score soon if they wanted to make a comeback. So, one of their more renowned players, Adam Johnson, got a hold of the puck and started pushing into the Steelers' defensive zone. But before he could reach the goal, the match got interrupted by one of the most tragic incidents in ice hockey history. As Adam was making his way to the goal, a different player of his team bumped into Matt Petgrave of the Steelers. This resulted in Matt getting launched in the air and slicing Adam's neck with one of his skates. For those who don't know, professional hockey skates are sharpened to a razor's edge, so it took very little force to leave a deep laceration across Adam's neck, causing him to bleed profusely in front of both the live crowd and the TV audience. Medics at the arena tried to stop the bleeding, but the cut was too deep. He had already lost a lot of blood on the ice. Adam was then rushed to a nearby hospital. Unfortunately, despite going into surgery as quickly as possible, Adam couldn't survive the injury and passed away just hours later. Matt was arrested shortly after on suspicion that he had cut Adam on purpose. However, investigators found no foul play in Adam's death and ultimately ruled it.
What? What? Oh my gosh, I'm never. No, bro. No, bro. No, bro. No, bro.
A tragic accident. The only silver lining in this entire case is that it resulted in the English Ice Hockey Association making neck guards mandatory for all players, something that would have likely prevented this from happening altogether. But at the time, wearing this protective gear was only a suggestion.
That was only a suggestion?
On the evening of September 2, 2011, TVN, one of the biggest networks in Chile, was airing the latest episode of a show called Calle 7. It was a live game show where teams competed in various challenges to make their way to the top, and this weekend's episode was supposed to be no different. But things took a disturbing turn about halfway through the episode when the show's host interrupted the competitors seemingly out of nowhere and told them to stop.
Nos acaba de llegar una información muy difícil de entregar. No habíamos querido decir nada antes de chequear bien lo que estaba sucediendo porque compromete a personajes del canal, a personas muy queridas, a un equipo del canal, entre ellos Felipe Camiroaga y Roberto Bruce, que también estaba en aquel vuelo a la isla de Juan Fernández, según tengo entendido. Es información que nos está llegando en este momento. El Ministerio de Defensa informó esta tarde el presidente de la República que un equipo de TVN iba al borde de una nave de la Fuerza Aérea de Chile que capotó en el archipiélago de Juan Fernández.
However, the reason for this interruption had nothing to do with the show itself. The host was talking about the C-212 Chilean Air Force plane that departed from the Arturo Merino Benitez International Airport earlier that day at around 2 p.m. It was headed for the Robinson Crusoe Airport, located hundreds of miles off the coast of Chile. Aboard was a full TV crew from the network, including the two renowned presenters, Felipe Camiroaga and Roberto Bruce. They were visiting Robinson Crusoe Island to report on the reconstruction after the 2010 earthquake. The flight started without a hitch. Unfortunately, as they were approaching the runway, the wind became extremely strong, making it impossible to land. The pilot tried to land a couple of times, circling in the air after each attempt. However, on the third attempt, witnesses saw the plane lose altitude much faster than expected and crash into the ocean just a mile from the island.
Why would he
By the
still
time rescuers reached the crash
that?
site, it was already too late.
If it's windy, keep flying. I would have like, bio, keep flying.
All 21 people aboard the
That's it,
C-212 plane had passed away.
That's
But
crazy.
while investigators initially believed that all of those deaths were due to the impact of the crash, the reality turned out to be far darker. As they were searching the wreckage, they found footage that one of the cameramen took of the interior shortly before the crash. The footage showed the passengers strapped into their seats, completely unaware of their fate. But the more haunting discovery happened when investigators found an SD card inside an empty water bottle floating near the crash site. This card contained hundreds of images. However, analysis of these images showed that 2 of them were taken after the crash, including one of the plane's windows covered in water. These images put the crash into a whole new perspective. They showed that several passengers, including the cameraman who took these photos and preserved the SD card in the bottle, likely survived the initial crash. Sadly, they were trapped inside a rapidly sinking plane with no way out, forced to watch their aircraft fill up with water until there was no air left to breathe.
Yeah, bro. I ain't gonna lie. I'm about to start packing a scuba diving fit with me, or a fucking something where I can breathe underwater, bro. I'm not lying. No joke.
Niagara
in my
Falls
bag.
is widely regarded as one of the world's most breathtaking natural wonders. However, while the surface is undeniably
Wait, is it legal to get your own parachute?
beautiful, the
I'm
depths
jumping
beneath
out,
the
bro.
falls
Fuck
hide the
that.
disturbing history of many who lost their lives to the currents.
If we overland,
One such
most likely overland. Bro, yeah, if we overland, I'm jumping out. Hopefully I don't land somewhere where I can get cooked.
incident was captured live on TV on May 30, 1985, when reporter Phil Kavitz was hosting a section about real estate in front of the falls. Suddenly, in the background, the camera captured a man caught in the current behind Phil. The rushing water carried him to the edge of the falls before throwing him over the 170-foot drop. And while a lucky few have survived the fall from the Niagara Falls, he wasn't one of them. The treacherous terrain under the falls also made it difficult to retrieve his remains. Once recovered, investigators identified the man as 56-year-old Robert Ahrens and concluded that the act was deliberate. However, Robert was only one of the 5,000 bodies that have been recovered from the foot of the falls in the last 175 years. Many of these 5,000 deaths were intentional, but there were a lot that weren't. And unfortunately, surviving a fall from Niagara Falls is near impossible. Once you fall in, the cold water makes it extremely difficult to breathe, making it even more challenging to swim to the surface. The water near the edge can also move at over 60 miles per hour, adding another layer of difficulty to an already impossible challenge. But the jagged rocks at the base of the falls is what marks the end for most people. On the 23rd of August 2010 at around 10 a.m., 21 tourists from Hong Kong returned to their tour bus after visiting the historic Fort Santiago in Manila, Philippines. They were also accompanied by 3 Filipino tour guides, and the trip had been going fantastic so far. But just as they were about to set out to the next location, they got interrupted by a middle-aged man in a police uniform. He was openly carrying multiple firearms, and his demeanor made it clear he wasn't afraid to use them either, something that became even more apparent as time went on. For now, things started off fairly calm, with him asking the driver for a ride to the next station. The bus driver tried to reject the request respectfully, explaining that he couldn't let him on because it was a private vehicle, not a public bus. However, the man wasn't having any of it. As soon as the bus driver rejected his request, he equipped one of his firearms and claimed that he was taking the bus hostage. This was 55-year-old Rolando Mendoza, a police officer with nearly 30 years of service. But he'd recently been fired over drug charges that Rolando claimed were untrue. Getting fired left him with no pension after 3 decades of hard work. And while he tried to fight for his
Where's
job
this at? They look Asian, but Mexican.
official means, his superiors wouldn't listen. In an act of desperation and defiance, Rolando took this bus full of tourists hostage and presented a single demand. He wanted his job back. The situation so far looked fairly manageable, with 2 of his former colleagues establishing communications without any pushback. They were even able to convince him to release a few of the hostages. Granting his relatively simple demand would have been easy, but what followed was one of the biggest hostage disasters in the country's history, all because those in charge couldn't agree on the next move. Things started going downhill when Rolando's brother tried to approach the bus and was immediately detained by the officers. This made the already furious Rolando even angrier and more unstable. The situation only got worse once the media got involved. Nearly every news channel in the country started broadcasting the situation live. They talked about everything, including the plans officials were making outside. What they didn't know, however, was that the bus had a working TV and Rolando was watching and listening in on everything. This could have helped him formulate a plan and get...
Now, why the hell would they say they plan out loud? Are you kidding me? Why the hell would you say that's like, hey, we're gonna do this and do that, and then now we don't tell the public
what he wanted without hurting anyone. Unfortunately, the lackluster response from the officials made a peaceful resolution near impossible. His anger reached a boiling point when he saw how his brother was being treated by the police on live TV. This resulted in Rolando getting blinded by rage and opening fire on the hostages. Around the same time, the bus driver managed to free himself from the handcuffs Rolando put him in and escape through the driver's side door.
That's scary.
Unfortunately, while he was able to remain unharmed, other hostages weren't as lucky. Since, according to the bus driver, they were all dead, leaving Rolando alone in the bus. This revelation gave authorities the go-ahead to surround the bus and try to break in without any more casualties. But Rolando wasn't willing to go down without a fight. As soon as they tried to enter through the emergency exit, Rolando opened fire, hitting one officer on his bulletproof helmet and barely missing the others. So the officers thought of a different strategy. They flooded the back of the bus with tear gas, forcing him to the front, right into the crosshairs of a sniper, finally ending the hostage crisis.
Imagine.
It wasn't until after his death that police realized the bus driver had misunderstood the situation and that 9 of the hostages were still alive.
Oh.
The massive loss of innocent lives broadcast live for the world to see, coupled with officials making wrong decisions at every turn, drew intense global scrutiny, marking this as one of the worst and most tragic incidents in Filipino history.
Oh. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Nah, bro, yeah, that's crazy, bro. I'm not gonna lie, that's insane. Bro, what do y'all think, bro? Would y'all survive stuff like that? Me, bro, you gotta be ready to just do stuff like that. I ain't gonna lie. You just gotta be ready to you just gotta be ready for shit like that, bro. I don't even know what to say about that. I ain't gonna lie. Tell me what y'all think about that, man, down below. Damn. Anyways, guys, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Follow me on all socials at NOlimitbrax. Also, follow me on Brax Generius for your visual needs. If you need videography or photography, contact me. Anyways, guys, I'm Brax out. Peace. On to the next. On to the next.